everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Huck. Today we're wrapping up the Harper Collins books that I read in the last couple of months. I'm a little bit late on doing this, but the Harper Collins union strike ended around mid-February. The workers have gone back to work. They reached a resolution. Like, it's all very exciting. And so now I can talk about the Harper Collins books that I read over the last few months. I am hoping that this is going to be a pretty quick video for a couple of reasons. One is that I don't have a lot of books to talk about because I don't think in general I read a ton of Harper Collins titles, but I also kind of started avoiding them a little bit because I didn't want to have to hold reviews. But also I think this is going to be a little bit short because unlike smart people, I did not film review clips as I went. So I'm reviewing all of these books now, and some of these it's been like 2 months since I read them, and so my memory may not be super great as to what I thought about the book. So this may be a little bit shorter, but that's okay. I also feel like a lot of these I don't have super strong opinions about, except for the Hobb books that I read, but I'm not going to be reviewing them here. Anyways, this is it. I'm hoping this video is going to be pretty short, but it might not be if I keep rambling and in this intro. Speaking of the Hobb books that I read, I finished the Fitz and the Fool trilogy and The Realm of the Elderlings by reading Fool's Quest and Assassin's Fate. I'm not really going to say much about them here for multiple reasons, partially just because they're so far into the series there's not much I can say, and partially because for these ones, I did film standalone reviews right after I read them, so those ones will have more full fresh thoughts where I actually remember what I was talking about because I didn't wait to film them for this one. But just overall, I really disliked this middle book. It was not a good time, and I generally liked this last one. You know, there are always things that I nitpick at with her books, but overall I felt like it was a good book. Also, I just really love Bee as a character. Anyways, now that the strike is over, I can post my spoiler discussions for both of these, so those will also be coming. I just wanted to do this kind of overall wrap up before posting those. So those will be coming soon. Okay, next up, the next one I have, which I think the one that I read the longest ago, is The Golem and the Genie by Helene Wecker. This is actually the first book in a duology. I saw something that maybe she's writing even a third book. Anyways, I read this one in December, and this is historical fantasy where we are following a golem and a genie as they are in New York City in, what year is this set in? 1899. Both of them end up in the city by various means, and we're following them as they are trying to figure out how to navigate this human world. They're coming from very different experiences, not just because they are kind of magical beings from different cultures, but they have different levels of life experience and different just inherent natures to them. So the genie in this is like hundreds of years old, and he is from a race of genies who are very focused on freedom. They are like beings of like spirit and air who cannot really be pinned down, but he has been trapped. And so he is very freedom focused. The golem that we're following, she is essentially newly created. She has just been created, has no experience of the world, and her basic nature is to essentially be a servant to others. So they have very different just natures and levels of experience of the world, but both of them are trying to navigate this human world. And then they of course cross paths, and while they are very different, they see a degree of commonality between them because they are both trying to navigate this unfamiliar world. So overall, I enjoyed this. I had some things about it where, like, I think they didn't even cross paths until like 40% of the way into the book. So for a lot of the book, I was really like, where is this going? Like, this isn't at all what I thought this book was going to be about, because for like 40%, they're not even encountering each other, and I thought more of the book would be focused on the two of them, like, getting to know each other. But then once they do kind of encounter each other, I did think their dynamic was interesting to follow. I think her writing style, or the way that she constructs her story, also kind of led me to this feeling of like, where is this going? Because while we are following our two main characters primarily, we also get a couple of other perspectives here and there, and some of them make sense while we're getting those perspectives, and some of them I was like, who is this random person? Why are you telling me this story? And the thing is, it all comes together eventually. And it all makes sense eventually, like how these stories are intertwined and why those stories were being told. It just like took a little while to get there, and that wasn't really what I was expecting out of the story. So it definitely is the kind of thing where like, you don't really get the story until you complete the story, because it does all come together at the end, but it's very like, there are some parts of it that feel very disconnected up until that point. I did really like, though, seeing how all of these different characters and stories weave together over the course of the story. I liked both of our main characters. Well, I think that I liked both of them. I think that the Golem is kind of, in some ways, inherently more likable because she is created by humans for humans, and so she's more palatable to humans. And the Genie is not any of those things, you know? He is very much, he's not human, and he is not connected to humanity in any way, and does not feel beholden to them in any way, and so is not particularly likable in the same way. But I still kind of liked his character because I was like, but like, he's just acting in accordance with his nature, you know? Like, I don't think that necessarily makes him an inherently unlikable character. I think my favorite character may have been the rabbi in this. So there is this rabbi who finds the Golem and takes her in and helps her. And I just really loved his character. What I particularly liked about him was that he just like, there's something about his vibe that just is like so perfect, because he really reminded me of stories that like my mom would tell me when I was a kid, like midrash stories or other like rabbinic stories, like stories that involved rabbis. There is this very like quiet thoughtfulness that like, I don't know how to explain what it is, but the vibe of this rabbi character just so much reminded me, it felt very nostalgic, reminded me of like the vibes of the characters from these like midrash stories or other like rabbinic stories that I would hear as a kid. So like, I loved that about him. So I ended up giving this one 4 stars. I actually also started the sequel to this, which is I think called The Hidden Palace. I ended up DNFing that one for a few reasons. I feel like that story, that like, first of all, I think the first book really stands on its own. I don't think it needed a sequel. It's a complete story, and I don't think that it really like required anything. I don't feel like this additional story was adding much to it. So it just felt unnecessary, for one thing. I also think that when you have a book that has a very distinct like, I don't know, narrative structure, or like a thing that it's doing in the way that the Golem and the Genie has, where it is kind of telling you all of these different stories and then you see how they all weave together at the end, that works really well once. I don't know if it works so well when you try to replicate it a second time, but I also don't know if it would work well if you had that as the first book and then the second book had a totally different like story structure. I think it's very difficult to follow up like as a sequel to a book that had a very distinct structure like that, like a thing that it was doing, because it's hard to replicate it, but it's also like hard if you don't. It's complicated. But I also just, I wasn't enjoying the second book because I felt like it was kind of undercutting some of the themes or messages of the first one. Because one of the things that I liked about the first book was that it had this theme about like, even if people are so different in so many ways, whether it is their nature or their culture or whatever it is, you can still, you know, understand them and appreciate them, and you can live together, and you can be, you know, be in relation to other people and appreciate people no matter how different you are. And it felt like the second book was kind of being like, just kidding, that was wrong. And I didn't like that. I felt like it was kind of undoing it and being like, no, people are too inherently different, so everything's gonna go down the drain no matter what. And I was like, that's not the message that I wanted from this. I liked how the first one ended. So I wasn't a fan of that. I also was kind of getting frustrated with the way that these characters were being portrayed, because kind of related to what I was saying about how like the Golem is more palatable to human beings because she is made by and for human beings, and is essentially her like nature is to serve humans. And so like she doesn't have very good boundaries. She's very self-sacrificing. She really only like thinks about and cares about other people, and doesn't really take care of herself or have her own like desires for things, or if she does, she really like tamps them down. And it's like, yeah, it's easy to like somebody if they have no boundaries and will sacrifice everything for you, but like that doesn't make her, being a martyr in that way doesn't inherently make her a better person. And like, yeah, the genie is like very self-centered. He's selfish. He doesn't always think about the impact of his actions on others. Although I do think that he like grows a little bit over time, but like he is very like self-focused, very freedom-focused. He's not self-sacrificing. He's very like, no, I'm taking care of myself in my own life. And I feel like the book was trying to be like, and obviously the genie is bad and wrong for doing that, and the golem is good and right for being a self-sacrificing martyr who is more palatable to human beings. And I'm like, I don't agree with that. I think that, now maybe this is where the book was going, because granted, I didn't finish it. But I thought it would have been better if it was more like, yes, they are two extremes and they can learn from each other and balance each other and come towards the middle, because neither of them is wholly right or wholly wrong. They both should temper themselves and kind of come towards the middle. But I just was getting really frustrated with how it felt like the story was really like almost vilifying the genie just for acting in accordance with his nature, and just because his nature is not made for or by humans and is not palatable to them and is not self-sacrificing, and because he like cared about himself and wanted to take care of himself. Anyways, it is very possible that that story would have come around at the end. I don't know, especially knowing how the structure of the first book went, where the story didn't really like, it kind of seemed a little like disconnected until the very end where everything comes together. Maybe this one was going to be the same, where it was kind of going in different directions and then it really came together with a message that I would have enjoyed more at the end. I don't know, but I was really not enjoying the ride, and I just was like, why am I reading this? So I DNF'd it. After that, I have two more. I don't remember which one of these I read first, but we'll start with Squire by Sarah Alfaji and Nadia Shamas. This is a graphic novel that I picked up and I kind of bought it on a whim, and then recently was like, oh, I should read this because I've been very in the mood for like night themed things, and this is about a squire. And this ended up not being what I was expecting, but I really enjoyed it. So it is set in this like Middle Eastern inspired world, so it's not like European medieval knights, but it's set in this Middle Eastern inspired world. We're following our main character, Aza, who has dreamt of becoming a knight, but she is part of the, is it Ornu people, or Ornu status, which are an oppressed group of people in this world. And so she doesn't have the same opportunities as everyone else, but the like order of knights are allowing people, anybody at this moment, including the Ornu people, to become squires and to try and become knights. And so she joins them and goes to become a squire. However, while she is there, she very much becomes disillusioned of who knights are and what their role is, because she has always very much seen them as heroes who bring justice to the world and protect people. But she realizes as she gets further and further into it that knights are really there to maintain the status quo, and very often that includes harming and just maintaining the oppression of her people. And she wanted to join the knights in order to help people and do heroic deeds and bring justice to the world, but realizing that within the system that the knights are a part of, that is not going to be what happens. So it is very much following her, as first she is trying to become a knight, but then is disillusioned by this, and then how she tries to start to maybe bring it all down. So this, as I said, not at all what I was expecting it to be, but ended up really enjoying it, and definitely had this like theme around like hero worship and how making heroes of essentially like military bodies is imperial propaganda and just perpetuates the status quo and often oppression and other like terrible things in the world. So it was a very interesting graphic novel that I really enjoyed. Okay, and then the last one that I have is The Two Princesses of Bamar by Gail Carson Levine. This was a reread. This was a book that I read a lot as a kid and I always really loved, and then I was talking to Kara about it recently, so I decided to reread it, and it was very fun to reread. So this takes place in the fantasy world of Bamar, and we're following two princesses. They are sisters. One of them is very bold. She wants to become a knight and like hunt monsters and find a cure to this mysterious illness called, I think, the Gray Death that has been going around. The other sister is very timid and fearful, and so she really relies on her very brave, bold sister to protect her. But then the bold sister becomes ill. She gets the Gray Death. And so the timid sister has to go on an adventure into the world, which she is very fearful of, but she must go in order to track down the cure for the Gray Death, which no one has ever found a cure before, but she is determined that she will save her sister, and in the process she must face her fears. And it's such a fun book. I just really loved it. I loved rereading it. I really like the characters. I love seeing our main character face her fears, and, you know, like, she's not someone who ever wanted an adventure. She wanted to stay home and embroider. She does like a lot of embroidery, and her embroidery is like part of the story in some areas. But I love characters like that where they didn't necessarily want an adventure, but then circumstances thrust one upon them and they have to rise to the occasion. They have to face their fears and do what they can. And I love that kind of story. There also is a sorcerer character in this who I really enjoy. It was just super fun to reread this, and it's very like nostalgic. I gave this one 5 stars. I do feel like that 5 stars was probably very much influenced by nostalgia. Like, if I was reading this for the first time now, I still would probably give it a high rating, but maybe not 5 stars. But as a nostalgia read, 5 stars, excellent. Then after this, I actually tried to read the prequel. There's like a companion prequel that is The Lost Kingdom of Bamar, which came out, I think, like a year or 2 ago. This was published a long time ago. I don't actually know when this was published first. Let me see if I can find out. This was first published in 2001, and then like maybe 2 years ago, another book in the series came out, which is not about the same characters. I think it's more like backstory to the world. Anyways, I ended up DNFing that one. Not because it was terrible, it just wasn't catching my interest, and kind of related to what I was saying about this, being that I think part of what I loved so much about this was the nostalgia for myself, and reading another story set in the same world that but did not have the nostalgic factor because I didn't read it as a child. It just wasn't grabbing me. So not that I would like never read it, like maybe someday I would be like, oh yeah, I'll pick it up, but it just like I wasn't into it, so I ended up DNFing it. Okay, so those are all of my Harper Collins reads from the last couple of months. I'd love to know if you've read any of these and what your thoughts were on them, or anything else you want to tell me about your reading in the last few months. But thank you all for watching, and until next time, bye!